Hello, we are back again with Kevin Kearns chapter 7 now. And here we go, if I can find it. Okay. Usually, when a box arrived at our house, I was the first one to insist that we open it. Since Dad died, I'd pretty much lost my desire for anything new. A box had been delivered yesterday, a very large box that held the look of great promise. And at first, I was a bit interested. Then, as I fingered the label, wondering what could be inside, I noticed the New Hampshire return address from my Aunt Chris. Uh-oh, this could be good or bad. My cousin George was just a little older than me, and Aunt Chris knew what it was like to need clothes for kids. After all, she had 13 kids. This box was probably full of George's cast off clothes for me. It might have some cast off toys as well, but the likelihood was in favour of clothes. Great. Hand me downs, my favourite. I wouldn't be nagging Mum to open that any time soon. Outside, it was a wet, grey April Sunday. I began to live for the weekends where I could stay in my pyjamas until noon on Saturday, and today was just perfect. The weather matched my mood. Jean was already gone, probably working or hanging out with her friends. The 6 years difference in our ages never seemed so big as it did now. Since Dad's death, she had been spending less and less time at home. Part of me welcomed the quiet. My mother was puttering around in her bedroom and didn't know that I was awake yet. I ambled into the kitchen where I poured myself a bowl of Cheerios and opened the sugar container. The silver top clanked against the white ceramic body. I paused a moment, listening intently to see if Mum had heard. With great stealth, I spooned four, then five, heaping spoonful of sugar over my cereal. I loved that mass of melted sugar at the bottom of the bowl, and without supervision from Mum or my sister, it was going to be a great big gooey mess today. I added a little milk, and then I shuffled into the living room where I turned on cartoons and sat in my old and very well loved Pam sleeping bag. Up until the time Dad died, I'd wanted to be a pilot. Now I didn't want to be much of anything. I just wanted the pain in the centre of my chest to go away. Just as the roadrunner beast bested Willie Coyote, and I was scooping up the last of my sugary milk. Mum came into the room with the big box. Kevin, I'm glad you're up. We need to get through this box of clothes Chris just sent. My least favourite activity on any given day was trying on clothes. Today just didn't feel like a day to try on someone else's clothes. Maybe I could put it off a week or two or 30. Do I have to? Mum frowned. Something she was doing a lot lately. I really missed her ready smile and the way she was always there to help with anything. Now it seemed like everything she did was such a huge effort. Yes, we have to. Look at how much time it must have taken Chris to pack all this, to say nothing of how much it must have cost to ship it. She flipped the lid of the boxes over to see the cost of shipping. By her pursed lips, I could tell it was a lot. I knew Mum was struggling to keep things together for Jean and me. Most of the time, I didn't think about how hard it must be for her until someone gave us charity. I think she could take just about anything except charity, and yet we were in no position to turn down clothing. Just last Sunday, I'd put on my clothes for church, and when I came out of the room, she had put her hand to her mouth in horror. Kevin, are those your newest pants? Yeah, why? They're halfway to your knees. My growth spurts had to put a crimp in the budget. I decided to give her a break. It wasn't her fault she couldn't keep buying me new pants. Fine, I'll try them on. It was just easier this way. I also knew if I didn't, she'd go down the guilt trip road, and I was not in the mood for that. She pulled out a couple of shirts that looked like to be okay, and I picked one up that looked promising and put it on after shedding my pajama shirt. That should make her happy. Mum looked at me critically and nodded. That looks good. She started sifting through and putting pants on the back of the chair. I knew she was looking for pants that were long enough to fit my ever lengthening legs. Here, she held out a pair of pants. Try these on. They look long enough. I backed away from her in horror. No way. She had to be kidding. They were pink. I'd be the laughing stock of the neighborhood. Come on, Kevin, right now. Ma, they're pink. They are not. Yes, they are too. By now my voice was rising, becoming shrill. Kevin, they're red, just a little faded because George has worn them before. Now put them on. This time, both her face and voice were hard. There was no emotion. I could tell she was holding it back. The only time she cried was when she was alone in her room at night. I'd listened through the thick darkness of the house, and I cried with her, both of us alone in our beds. I stumped to my room, threw off my pajamas, and pulled the pants on. Wonderful. They fit perfectly. Disgusted, I stumped back out into the living room where Mum waited, still going through the box, putting shirts, pants, and underwear and socks in separate piles. Surely she would see that this was never going to work. Kevin, those look really good on you. She smiled. I just stared at her. Couldn't she see what was going to happen? I don't like them. They're perfect. Now, you're going to wear them today, and that's final. We continued to argue. I never paid attention to that. That's that's final argument. Since Dad died, I'd become a lot more argumentative. Mum still always bested me because I really couldn't stand to hurt her. But come on, why would I want to wear clothes someone else had worn? And pink. I was having some serious doubts about my cousin. Any self-respecting guy did not wear pink pants. Kevin, go on outside. The rain stopped. These can be your play clothes. You don't have to wear them at school. With that pronouncement, she picked up the clothes that were the right size and marched into my room and started putting my cousin's hand-me-downs into my bureau drawers. And to make matters worse, she started taking out some of the clothes that were my favourites. No, don't take that shirt! This time I yelled at her. I couldn't help it. I grabbed the shirt she held in her hands and hugged it close to me. It was the shirt I wore the last time I went to see Dad in the hospital. I usually had that shirt hidden under my pillow, but because I hadn't made my bed, it was just lying there in plain sight. Mum stopped, and without saying anything, she gently took the shirt from me and put the shirt back down on the bed. I breathed a silent breath of relief. She still felt guilty about not waking me up that night. Dad died, so this is where I had power over her. When she spoke, her voice was a little thick, hoarse. Very well, I won't take that shirt, but I want you to go outside and get some exercise. You've been eating too much sugar and watching too much TV today. Great. Now that Dad was gone, she was going to nag me about my health habits. I couldn't take it anymore, so I slammed out the front door and sat on the steps to the sidewalk. My eyes caught movement across the street. Crap. If I'd seen them, I wouldn't have been so quick to escape the house. Usually I look both directions before leaving my front door. This time, I was ambushed. There they were, the whole gang. Tony, Dave, Derek, Tommy, and all the rest. They started crossing the street and Tony struck a pose, just like the new Dockers commercial. Nice pants, Kev! The guys all laughed. That was it. I knew they'd zeroed in on the one thing that hurt me the most today. Hey, when did pink come the new Studley colour? Hey Kev, how'd you like a pink jacket to go with your girly pants? Their voices blended into a cacophony of sounds swirling around my head. I tried to shut it out. In that split second, my head felt like it was going to explode. I looked up and met Tony's eyes. Silently, I pleaded with him to just leave me alone. All those years of friendship had to amount to something. For a brief second, I thought he might call the mob off, but that flicker of compassion was so brief and fleeting, I probably just imagined it. Instead, he shouted, "Hey, maybe these pants wouldn't look so gay if they were a different color." "Yeah, let's do it." I started to get up, to run inside the house. I didn't care how chicken it looked, but Dave and Derek grabbed my arms, swung me around, and it was Tony who landed the first punch to my gut. Oof! I gagged. I couldn't breathe. Doubled over, I struggled to think of a way out. But within seconds, strong hands grabbed my wrists and ankles, and they were carrying me to the street, to the deep depression in the road right in front of my house. The one I jumped over every day to and from school. Because of the heavy rain, it was one big, murky puddle. One, two, three! They let go and I crashed into the puddle. Old leaves decayed after winter stuck into my eyes. In a panic, I flailed to get my head out of the water. I knew I got some of the guys wet as they yelled in protest. I blinked frantically and choked out some of the frigid, muddy water. They circled me like a pack of dogs, raging an attack and laughing at the sorry picture I made sitting in the puddle of water that totally covered my legs. "See? No more pink pants, Kev." "Yeah, now they're brown." "Nah, they're the color of mud." Furious, I scrambled to my feet and charged. I didn't care who I hit, but I was determined to hit someone. In my blind rage, I didn't see the punch, but I sure felt it, and over I went. This time I was on my stomach, and several shoes pummeled at me in the sides and rained down on my shoulders and arms as I raised my hands to protect my head and face. "Let's do it again!" With even more violence, hands grabbed my wrists and ankles, but this time I really struggled. I thought as hard as I could, screaming and writhing like a wild thing until someone, I think it was Derek, grabbed my hair and jerked my head back. He put his face next to my ear and growled, "Keep fighting, you little pissant, and you'll never walk again." I felt my insides turn to liquid. He sounded like he really meant it. This time, because I was face first, I saw the puddle coming, and it came fast. I didn't have enough time to take a breath, because my face was already underwater when I inhaled. In total panic, I thrust myself up with my hands and coughed, gagged, and choked all at the same time, puking up muddy water, feeling it burn down my throat and up into my sinuses. I got the cold feeling of fear inside my chest. These guys had crossed some kind of line today. In a panic, I pushed myself up and tried to run, but I was completely surrounded. Again and again, they picked me up and threw me into the puddle. Once I hit my head on the edge of the sidewalk, my vision spun, and I saw stars, and for a moment the world went black. But it was only just a moment. My one-time friends had turned into a frenzied pack of wild animals, and I was their terrified prey. I learned to not get up. If they wanted to throw me into the puddle, they would have to work for it by picking me up out of the puddle themselves. The first time I didn't fight, I just lay there, eyes closed, feeling the cold texture of the roadway underneath my bruised cheek. Grit and mud had worked their way underneath my clothes, and I felt lump and breathless. I thought I was dying. But my body continued to fight, to live by gasping great big gulps of air. It was the only sound I could hear. Then I heard them coming back at me with grunts and growls and snarls. This time they decided to cover me with mud and leaves. They were all covered with muddy water by this time, so they no longer cared if they got dirty. I felt each donation of rotting vegetation land on my body and felt like I was being buried alive. At first, I just lay there and surrender until they started to bury my head. That's when I discovered something. I still had plenty of will to live. With a roar of rage, I clambered to my feet and rushed at the first boy in sight. It happened to be Toby. I rushed him and tackled him by the waist, swinging us both with the momentum of my fury, and we both landed in the puddle. I felt a certain amount of satisfaction at his grunt of pain, but Tony's friends quickly extinguished my momentary triumph. They threw me into the puddle again, kicked all the collected debris onto me, and then with their feet they kicked at me, holding me down, then began pushing my face underwater. That's enough. I barely heard the words. My ears were so full of mud and water, but the vicious hands that were vices let me go. Some more quickly than others. Tony, you're an ass. He's had enough. Leave him alone. It was Tony's older brother, Mark. I'd seen Mark plenty of times, but because he was older, I had never spent any time around him. I was just grateful the attack was over. My tormentors left me, slinging insults with venom and making threats for a dismal future. As their laughter faded, I just lay there. I wasn't sure how much time passed. Maybe part of me hoped a car would just come along, dart my street, and take me away from this life. I felt weary and hollow inside with an emptiness that I doubted I could ever fill. In that moment, I realized I hated my life and everyone in it. Dad had always said, just punch them in the nose, when I told him about being bullied. And while I had one moment when I charged Tony, where I recalled his words, I realized that I just wasn't that tattoo and seemed to say, hit me. My anger against Tony began simmering beneath the surface. He had dominated me throughout our entire friendship. Oh, sorry, kind of person. I didn't want to hurt people. I didn't want to inflict pain. For a 12-year-old, I'd endured enough pain already for a lifetime. And if I had to inflict pain on someone just to be able to live in peace, well, then maybe I didn't want to be in this world. I rolled over onto my back. My injuries began to throb, and my labouring heart began to slow and settle into a comforting throb, throb, throb. I could feel my breathing return to normal. I was cold, wet, and shaking with emotion. With a disgusted sigh, I opened my eyes and saw the dark sky gathering behind the naked branches of the great elm tree far above my head. Little bugs were just barely noticeable, and they offered no protection from the rain that began to fall again. I didn't care. I wanted the rain to wash the humiliation of my hideous attack from my memory. A shadow leaned over me. I felt a momentary flash of terror until I realized it was our war-crazy neighbour, Dean. He walked with a cane and never said a word to anyone. He and my dad would exchange brief greetings any time they met out in front of the sidewalk, but no one else in this neighbourhood ever did. Normally, I would have been terrorized to be this close to Dean. After today, I didn't think I could ever be afraid again. He reached out a hand to me, and gathering and gritting my teeth against the pain, I accepted his help. I couldn't bring myself to look him in the eyes. The last thing I wanted or needed was someone's pity. Maybe he just didn't want me squashed by a car that decided to come down our street. Go on inside, son. His voice was gruff, but the hands that pushed towards me toward the steps I had so reluctantly descended 20 minutes before were exquisitely gentle. I mumbled, thanks, and trudged up the steps, leaving a wet trail of mud, leaves, and grief in my wake. Sorry. I blinked muddy water and gathering tears from my eyes as I stood before the door of my house, listening to the pattering of water coming off my clothes. I drew in a big breath, opened the door, and headed straight for the bathroom, where I pulled off my shoes, shirt, and those hated pink pants. I was shivering so hard by this time, from both emotion and the cold, that it was a struggle to get the pants off. It was as if they had developed a life of their own and clung to me like some perverse symbiotic relationship. Finally, I kicked them away from me and stood under the hottest shower I could stand, washing every bit of grime off my body. Even when I was clean, I stood under the hot spray. Perhaps I was trying to eliminate the target that had somehow become tattooed on my body. The last thing I that seemed the tattoo that seemed to say, "Hit me." My anger against Tony began simmering beneath the surface. He had dominated me throughout our entire friendship, but until now I had accepted it as part of his personality, the price I had to pay for his friendship. He was a jock, a natural at any sport he tried. I pretty much sucked at sports, and I knew it. It hadn't really seemed to matter much. We would play baseball, I would strike out or miss a fly ball. The guys would razz me a bit, saying that having me in their team was like having no one, but I'd been able to take it because I was part of the group. The water hammered my skull, and the deep, intense anger took hold of my heart. What Tony had done today was total betrayal, and that hurt like nothing else I'd ever experienced except my dad's death. As I stood there, I realized it felt exactly like a death. Tony and I had been friends since we were 4 years old, sleeping over at one another's houses, going to the beach and to the pool, playing Big Jim, McHale's Navy on Tony's back porch, and Battleship. I had done nothing but be his faithful friend all these years, and today, when all I needed was him to just stand up for me a little, I would have taken a few punches if it meant we could be friends, but this total humiliation was it. I had no dad. I had no friends. What was there to live for now? Finally, when I had to use up all the hot water, I had to get out of the shower. I wrapped myself up in a towel and tramped back to my room and put my pajamas back on. If Mum hadn't made me put those stupid pants on, none of this would have happened. She was waiting for me when I came back out, a sad and confused look in her eyes. What happened? What do you think? They didn't like my pink pants. And with that, I grabbed the stinking, soggy pink mass from the bathroom, shook it at my mother, mindless of the mess I was leaving on the floor, and stormed into the kitchen where I threw them into the trash can. I'm never wearing those disgusting pants again. I can't believe you did this to me. You must hate me. I was screaming now, out of control. Mum moved closer and tried to hug me. Kev, I'm sorry. They're just being boys. At this, I jerked away from her, a hydraulic mixture of anger and fear boiling inside of me. As I pulled away, I looked straight at her, and what I saw was my own undoing. The raw, searing pain in her own eyes diffused my anger, and I started to cry. This time, she reached for me. I crumpled her arms, and for a few minutes we both cried. This time, together. I cried the tears that had been building up since Dad died. I cried because he wasn't there to tell me that tomorrow would be better. I cried because he loved me no matter what, and he didn't care if I couldn't play sports or I couldn't run as fast as everyone else. And he certainly wouldn't have cared if I had worn pink pants. He would have put his hand on my neck, cradle my head, and look at me in the eyes and say, "Nothing matters but you, Kevin. I love you no matter what." But he was no longer here to reassure me. I missed his warm presence and his loving guidance. I missed our special Sunday times together. I assured that if my dad had lived, they would have never happened. And I cried because suddenly childhood seemed like a big fake out. It is supposed to be about puppies and games and fun, about friendships and baseball and good times. My mum handed me a tissue. I wiped my eyes and blew my nose. I felt like my blinders had been removed from my eyes. This was nothing but a big, fat, ugly world. As Mum cleaned up the mess of leaves and mud I made, when I shook the sodden bundle at her, I curled up in my sleeping bag in Dad's big yellow-brown armchair, feeling its warmth as his arms surrounding me, comforting me. The rest of the day it rained and I pretended my dad would be home shortly and would watch Creature Double Feature with me. Then everything would once again be back to normal. I dozed fitfully, waking every now and again, feeling the physical pain of my bruises and the deep-seated rawness of my grief. Finally, my weary, aching body let go and I dropped into a sleep, too dark and too silent for dreams to interrupt. And that was the end of chapter 7. Kevin Kearns Always picked last. Okay, see you next time.